Alright guys, so let's continue with building our application by building the login form next. So right now our application looks like this. We have our Bootstrap Lite navigation bar, and we have our links routing to the welcome page, the login page, and the sign up page. Right now the next thing we would like to do is to add our login page here using a Bootstrap form that we would put in a Bootstrap card. Alright, so right here we want to delete that paragraph, and we're going to have a form in our card. So let's add a Bootstrap card. So now I have a card, and I want to add a card header. So I'm going to put it in a h3 tag, and then I add a card header there, and here we want to call it the login form. Right, so I'm going to save that. Okay, so far it looks good. That's our login form, and now in the card body, that's where we would like to put in our form. So inside that div, I'm going to add another Bootstrap class of card body. Okay, and in this div, this is where we want to put our form. So I'm going to create a new form. The form doesn't go anywhere. We're going to give it some actions later, and in the form we want to have the input for our username, our password, and also for our form check input. Okay, so I'm going to add a div with mb3 class, and this would push this is margin bottom of 3 pixels, so it's going to push everything down by 3 pixels. I'm going to add a label, and I'm going to call that the username, and the name of the label will be username. Okay, and with the label, next thing we need is an input field. We need an input field of type text for the username, and we want to give it the class of form control. So this will be a class of form control, and for the name we can say username, and for the ID also we want to say username. Okay, I'm going to save that, and for the label we can give it also a class of form label. So I'm going to say class form label. Save that. Okay, that's going to push down the input field just a little bit. Okay, so we have this for our username, so I can easily copy that and paste it, so we can use that for our password. I can do Command D on Mac. I think you can do Command D on Windows, and I can edit that. Let me do it so many times. So I can change username to password, and I escape from that, and I can make this a capital P. And for this text too, we also want a type of password. Good, so we have the email and password. Okay, I don't really like it coming up with this every time, so I'm going to just open it on incognito window. Oops, that took everything away, so let's bring back that. And you know what, I'm just going to leave it this way because seems like a lot of pain to bring that incognito window because every time I save this, it's going to show up my username and password, and I don't want that. Here we go. I can move this. Oh no. Yeah, tilt it to the right of the screen and use this on the left. There we go. So now I can enter this. We get to our welcome page by default, but we're working now on a login page, and it looks good like this, right? So we have the username and the password, and the next thing we need is the remember me parts. So we're going to have a div. I'm going to call it the class of form check. Okay, and we're going to have our input, and so let's say input, and we're going to give our input class of form check input. Form check input, right? That's our class. Okay, and the type is not going to be text. Our type is a checkbox, so I'm going to say checkbox. And for the value, let's give it just an empty value, and let's give it an ID also, like we did for the others. Let's say remember, something like that. And in this case, the label comes after the checkbox. So now we're going to add our label and give it also a class of form check dash label. And for the label, we're going to give it the name of remember me, like so. And we have a 4 here, and I think we call that remember for our ID. That looks good. If I save that, see, we have the remember me nicely formatted. The next thing is we want to add in our login button. So let's put that in a div, and let's give it some couple of classes. I'm going to do margin top 3 to give it some space at the top and at the bottom as well. And I'll give it the D grid, so bootstrap grid, and another one of gap 2. Okay, and now I'm going to add a button, and we want to call it login, and we want to give it a class, and we want to give a class of btn for button, and color, let's say primary. Okay, so let's save this. Our form is looking good now, but it's still too close to the navigation like we saw in the previous video, and it's still not centered. So let's give it the Bootstrap card, because the form is inside the card. Let's give it the card a couple of styles. So for starters, I'm going to say margin top 5 to get some spacing at the top, and now you see it's below our navigation bar. So this is much better. And let's add a style here, an inline style, and we want to close this one here, and let's give a width for our card just to make it smaller. I would say 480 pixels, and also margin auto to make it center. Okay, looks good. If I save this, look at that, our form is smaller and nice and centered. Okay, so this is our Bootstrap login form, right? And yeah, this looks good. So we can create the register form, or we can go ahead and create the login functionality. Okay, so I want a user to be registered first before we log in. So let's quickly go and create the register form. So this is going to be similar to the register form, but we're going to change a couple of things. Yeah, to make it interesting, let's just go ahead and make the login form work. So for us to do that, we want to go to our login.ts. Let me do a control P here, login.ts right here. And right now we don't have anything here. We can define some variables for our username. So I'm going to say username, and let's say this is a string. Okay, and let's initialize this to an empty string. And the next one is our password, and I'm going to initialize it to an empty string as well. So we have these two variables here for our username and our password, and we can bind it using the ng model to these fields here. But before we can do that, we need to bring in the forms model. So I'm going to go to app.model.ts, and here I'm going to bring in the form model. So here we have routing model. Let's bring the forms model. Forms model. That's it. Bring in the forms model. I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back to login.html. Now for our form, we have name. It's important you have name, and we also need the ng model. So we're going to bind to the name, and this is usually called banana in the box. So we put the ng model inside, and we link that up with our username. That's the field what we just created in our TS file. And let's do the same for our password. So I'm going to say ng model equals our password. Okay, I'm going to save that. Let's focus on the username and password first, and later we can get back to the remember me functionality. So let's go back to the TS component here. We have our username and we have our password. Then we need a method that, or function that can do something when we click this login button. So here we want to create a handler for the function. So I can use click, and when the form is submitted, then I can do something, or I can come here to the form and create the handler here and say ng submit, and then create the name of the function here. So I'm going to call it login. Right, so we have an error now, and this is going to crash because we don't have this function. So let's create the function to fix that error. So I'm going to call it login. It's our function called login, and there we have our username and password. I saved that. Now it's good. And what we want to do next is that we need a service. We need a service that to talk to Firebase to do the login for us. So the next thing, we should generate our service. So here I'm going to bring back the terminal, and I want to generate a service. So I'm going to do this with ng, g for generate, S for services, and I'm going to put it in a folder called services because we're going to have more than one services. And the name of our service would be auth service because it's going to do authentication. And let's skip test as usual because we don't want to write unit test. We are not learning unit test in this video, so skip the test. Now our service is created for us, and let's go to the auth services now. So here we have our auth service. It's just a nice service from Angular, and what we would be creating is our login function that can allow us login to our application. And for us to do that, we need to import something called Angular Fire Auth. So if we're working with Firestore, we need to import the Firestore database or the real-time database. Same thing here. When we're working with authentication, we need to import the Fire Auth. So I'm going to say Angular private Angular Fire Auth, and I'm going to call it Angular Fire Auth. Okay, let me see if I can get IntelliSense here. No, I don't, so I have to import it manually. So I'm going to import it. The name is Angular Fire Auth. Okay, and this is coming from at Angular. It's Angular Fire. So at Angular Fire right here, then one more step slash, there should be something called auth. Yeah, good. So we have Angular Fire auth imported from Angular Fire, so we are injecting it to our service as a dependency injection. And now we want to create a function for login, so I'm going to call the function login, and our function should take two parameters, right? The email, which is a string. The email is still the username, so we're calling it the username in the other place, but it's the same. And the password, that's also a string. Yeah, so we have our login function with an email and a password. And for the login, to talk to Firebase, we need to use this dot, we call the af auth dot, we call sign in. You have a lot of options right here. You have sign in with direct, with pop-up, with phone number, a lot of options, but the one we'll be using for now is sign in with email and password. So this one right here. Okay, and then we want to pass in two parameters, the email and then the password. Okay, those are the two parameters that it requires, and this is going to return a promise, so let's return it. So return. Okay, so this is our login function. Very simple, right? So we're going to go back to our login component. Now that we have that login function, let's inject our service right here. So I'm going to say private auth service. I'm going to inject that service, what's called auth service, and let me just import it here, private auth service, and let's call the login method from the auth service. So I'm going to say this dot auth service dot, what method do we have? We have login, that takes two parameters. It takes this dot username, that will be the email, and then it's going to take this dot password, that will be the password. Okay, and like I said, this is going to return a promise, so we want to use dot then, and then we're going to, let's call a function after that's been executed. We can say something like we can use an alert for now. Later we're going to add a toast notification service that would display toast to our application, but for now let's use a simple JavaScript alert box and say login is successful. So this is the way you handle the then, or then you want to catch if there's any errors. So you're going to say catch, and then you want to pass in the error, and then you can display the error. I'm going to say alert and pass in the error there. Okay, so I'm going to save this now. And right now we don't have a user because you need to be authenticated before you can log in. So let's go back to Firebase. I'm going to go to console, Firebase, this one here, and oh no, I'm going to log in again. Let's go here. I'm using code with Henry. Next, I'm going to enter my password. And good, I'm logged in, and this is our app here. And in our application, we want to enable authentication, so we enabled it, email and password, and we enable Google authentication. So here let's add a user that we can sign in with. So let's say john.terry@gmail.com, and then for the password, let's say password. Okay, so I'm going to add user. All right, now we have the user. Later we're going to be creating this user from our application, but for now let's do it this way. And now we have our login form, we have a user, and let's see if we can log in with that user. So his email was john.terry@gmail.com, and the password, I use password. And if I hit on the login, you see it says login is successful, and I click OK, but I'm still on this page, and that is because I'm not doing a redirect. So let's bring in the Angular router to redirect me to the welcome page. So I'm going to come back here, private, I'm going to add the Angular router. I need to add the Angular router. Okay, that's good. Login is successful, and then I want to do a redirect, so I'm going to do this dot router dot navigate, and then I want to go / welcome. We want to go to the welcome page. Alright, so if I try to log in again, john.terry, spell that right, @gmail.com, and the password was password. And if we hit on login is successful. If I click OK, I get to the user page here. So we can do a lot of things here. We can display the email right now, and later on we can display the name. Okay, but for now let's leave it this way, and later when we do the registration, we're going to link that to the user's details, and here we can come and display the name. So we have our login functionality now. We can also add a logout functionality that is very easy, so I can do that next. So I can come here to the auth service, and then here I'm going to make another function. I'm going to call it logout. So log out. All right, and here I want to do the same thing, so return this dot fire auth dot, we have the logout or sign out, there you go, sign out. Alright, so we have our login function, and we have our logout function, but let's create a logout link on the navigation here. So let's go back to the navigation. So our navbar.html, we have a link to the welcome. Let's create another one. Or we can actually create a button. We can do a link, it's easy. Just copy and paste that. and we don't need a router link. We want this to be logout, so I'm going to change this to logout. Let me save it. Here we have logout here, and there is something here. If I hover here, it's showing me the cursor like I want to type. Unlike this, that's a pointer. So I can fix that by using something called role, and the role I can make it the button. And if I save that now and I hover at the login and the logout, now it's a pointer. Okay, so I have this link here, and let's make it not active. So I'm going to remove this class of active there, so it's going to be like this other links. Okay, and we want to add a handler to handle our logout function. So I'm going to do this click, and let's call it log out. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and our application would break. But then if I go to navbar component.ts, so navbar component.ts, and we want to create that function. It's called logout. Okay, now our application is back to life, and our logout function is coming from our auth service. So I'm going to add the auth service as a dependency. Auth service. Now we have that. Okay, and here I'm going to call the logout. So this dot auth service dot logout, and let's save that. And when we log out, we want to redirect somewhere. So let's bring back the router. Just like we did for the login. After we logged in, we redirected somewhere. For the logout, we want to do the same. So after logout, I'm going to do this dot router dot navigate, and I'm going to take us back to the login page. Save that. Okay, and now we are logged in, and we can log out, and it goes back to the login page. Let's log in again. john.terry@gmail.com, and password was password. And if I hit the login, we are logged in successful. Okay, and we are here, and we can log out. Just before I end this tutorial, in the next video I'll be showing you how we can do the remember me part. So to allow the user to remember us when we log in, and then we mistakenly close the browser and we get remembered by the application. We'll be doing that next, but before then I want to display a name. When in the welcome component where we have this username, I want to display a name, and I also would like to hide this link. So if you are not logged in, you shouldn't be seeing that page. Okay, and let's do that now. Okay, so how we would be doing that is we want to add a service. We want to add a method in our service, and this method will be getting the user from Firebase. Okay, later we're going to create our own model for the user, but now we can just create something that can get the state of the user from Firebase. So I'm going to go back to our service, auth service. We have login, logout. Let's create another method. We're going to call it get auth. So like get authentication. Yeah, so here we're going to return the state of the user from Firebase. So we are using also the Angular Fire auth here, and let's use auth state, and then let's do a pipe. So this is going to map what we get, so the auth, and it's going to return it in auth like this. So I'm going to save this, and I have an issue because I need to import the map operator, and we're importing the map operator from RxJS. It doesn't give me IntelliSense, so I'm going to do it manually. Import map, and that is from RxJS. So RxJS / operators. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and now our get auth function is good. So I'm going to go back to our nav.ts right here, and we want to use that auth function here. Okay, so how we would use the auth function would be we just say this dot auth service dot get auth right there, and we want to subscribe to it because it's returning an observable, and it's going to return a user, and this is our user right here, and we can save it to a variable. So let's have a user, and this should be your Firebase type. I'm just going to give it any to make things simple. So to save this user, I'm going to say this.user is equal to the user that we are getting from Firebase. Alright, so this is the way we get the user that is logged in, and we can display, we can check that user, and to see if we are getting back that user, then we can display the welcome component only if we are getting back that user. So if I go to our nav component, so navbar.component.html, here this is where we are displaying the welcome link, but now we can add a condition and use ngIf directive to display that page only if we have that user. So I can do ngIf user, and now I'm going to save it, and you see, okay, it's still there because we haven't logged out. Now we're logged out, and if I try to go to the welcome page, you see we don't have that welcome linked again because we are not logged in. Yeah, so later in the videos we're going to create the auth guard that won't allow us to get access to this page except we are logged in, right? But right now let's just hide those links, because when we are not logged in we only want to see the login and sign up. So now we don't have that welcome here, we only have the login and sign up. So let's do the same thing for the logout. So I'm just going to copy this if ngIf user and do that here, and if I save that, now the logout is gone. We can only see it when we are logged in. So if I go back and try to log in with John Terry, john.terry@gmail.com, and then I give it the password, and then I log in. So login successful. We're going to add a toast notification later. I click OK, and you see now we have the welcome and we have the logout. Okay, another thing we can do is we can hide this if the user is logged in already, because we don't want to have this link again because we are already logged in. So one thing we can do is to copy this ngIf user and here, okay, we can do it for both links, and I can do it here and say ng if not user. So if I save that, you see those links are gone. And I can do the same thing here and remove this one because both of them are under the unordered list. So if I take it a step above and do that check on the unordered list, and if I save that, now we have the welcome and the logout, and if I log out, you see we have the login and the sign up. Alright, this is where I'll be wrapping up in this video. In the next video, we are going to work on this remember me checkbox, and we're also going to be adding a toast notification to display messages instead of the dialog boxes from JavaScript. I hope you are having a nice time. You're learning a lot from this video. Keep watching, and thank you.